Hello. Today is April 11th, 2023, and I will make three presentations. One called the Roofless Cathedral, and the other two, one on Donato Bramante and the other one on Constantine Lipsius. But I will begin with the Roofless Cathedral. And the reason I do so is because now we are in between two Easters, the Catholic or the Western Christianity celebrated Easter 2 days ago, and 5 days from now there will be the Orthodox Easter. But beyond the circumstantial so-called details of the timing, I was attracted by this theme, which came spontaneously to me when I searched for a church designed by Constantine Lipsius, and I noticed it didn't have a roof. And somehow I felt this resonated with me. And I said, let me prepare a presentation about the roofless cathedral. It's something said about a roofless cathedral, but somehow I felt that it is in a way expressing our time. Do we still believe in God? I'm not so sure. And the roofless cathedral is a cathedral that, on one hand, it connects you vertically with the above, with the sky. I hesitate to use the word heavens, although Walter Gropius in the Bauhaus Manifesto does use it twice in a very short manifesto, the one he wrote in 1919. So let me begin to show. This is a first attempt to address this theme. Let me begin to show some images. First, I show this image of a cathedral that was bombed in the Second World War. And what could be more said? And unfortunately, at this very moment, there are bombs falling in Ukraine on various buildings and on many people. So obviously, we learn nothing. We learn nothing. If Russia, which lost millions of people in the Second World War, is launching now a war on its neighbor, not only that it is its neighbor, but the Russians claim that Ukrainians are actually Russians. So essentially, they are killing themselves if Ukrainians are Russians. It's very sad, but as Rem Koolhaas put it once, humans do not learn anything, and it does seem so. We learn nothing. But now I show you an image, a very moving image from a very moving movie or film, Nostalgia by Andrei Tarkovsky, the great Russian film director, which is this scene from Nostalgia or Nostalgia in English, which was filmed in Italy. This was filmed inside the cathedral without a roof in Tuscany. And we are going to see other pictures of this cathedral. Why did Tarkovsky place a little home inside the cathedral? I'm asking this question towards myself as well. What did he want to say? We see here three things, well, we see a few other things, but we see a Russian poet, the main character in the film Nostalgia, a dog, and a house. And they are inside the cathedral, inside the roofless cathedral. I'm sure he wanted to say something. Maybe that, we try to find protection from God inside the cathedral, and we place even our home inside the cathedral, but the cathedral is without a roof. So maybe that protection cannot truly happen. I don't know. I am suggesting to you to reflect on this scene from this very, very beautiful movie by Andrei Tarkovsky, and to ask yourself, what did he want to say with this scene? It's a scene in the movie towards the end of it. Anyway, now I just show it's a presentation made up of pictures of cathedrals without a roof, and I find them very, very moving, and I somehow feel that I remember when I was working on the PowerPoint presentation, I said to myself, maybe we should only build cathedrals without a roof these days. It's something about these broken cathedrals that seem to make them, somehow contemporary, expressing the truth of our time. Maybe a complete cathedral, of course, no cathedral was ever, truly completed, but a cathedral with a roof, uh, would be more assuring that it is, the sacred is still there intact and we can always rely on its protection. But is it so? I don't think it is so today. It's not so, because as opposed to the Middle Ages, when people fought, they still fought because they were humans. They had to fight, of course, but they fought with primitive technologies, with swords, with who knows what. But today we have violent technologies, immensely sophisticated, that fly above the cathedral. And this very thought, I think, could paralyze us in our attempt to grow with the cathedral, to grow with the building towards what I still hesitate to call the heavens. Anyway, it's a question mark that I place, about this presentation. What does it mean, a cathedral without a roof? And why is it that visually, and not only visually, why is it that these images seem to be meaningful for me today and maybe for us today? It's something about a cathedral that does not have a roof that I think deserves discussion. And before the discussion, of course, deserves reflection. Now, of course, we find refuge in all kinds of, assuring and self-assuring dogmas, that everything is fine, Easter is fine, we don't even ask why is it that there are two Easters, I mean, within Christianity, we have two different dates. It's not absurd. I think it is absurd. But, so we still find solace in religion, but to what extent that religion is still sustainable today, when we know that in many countries, the church itself as an institution goes through a crisis. For example, in Great Britain, I read a few years ago that 2 churches a year were desacralized. In other words, they were transformed to a function that had nothing to do with, with the religious, activities normally associated with the church or with the cathedral. There are churches that are transformed into condominiums. There are churches that are transformed into theaters or libraries. In one case, I even saw one being rented, at least, by a circus. Because of the tall ceiling, you can easily exercise your acrobatics within the cathedral. So maybe a cathedral without a roof does tell us a truth which in the comfort of our illusions about even the existence of God, we forget. I guess, I don't know if I approximated well why I became interested in this theme. But what if we build cathedrals intentionally without the roof? Because every image that I show now, belongs to churches and cathedrals which were meant to have a roof, and they did have a roof. And over time, because of various reasons, that roof vanished. But what if we make cathedrals roofless from the very beginning? I remember Mircea Eliade, who said, briser le toit de ta maison, break the roof of your house. He referred to a house, but in a way, a cathedral is also a house, the house of God. Why did Mircea Eliade advise us or invited us to do so? Maybe because if you break the roof, you do have a more direct dialogue or connection with the above, with the sky. And the vertical dialogue is perhaps important. But how to have that dialogue when we know that even if we break the roof, above the building flies a plane, flies a balloon, flies satellites, and fly bombers. So how could you, because, the builders of the cathedrals in the Middle Ages, for example, they literally grew towards the sky, towards God, towards the heavens with their building. But how can we grow with our building towards the sky when in the sky there are the machineries that I just mentioned? Not to speak about the fact that maybe, that cathedral that we think is pointing upwards is in fact pointing downwards, because on the sphere, or the approximate sphere that the planet Earth, as we call the Earth, apparently is after Copernicus, well, the church could be at the bottom of the so-called sphere and not at the top. Maybe the church did have all the reasons to protest vehemently against Copernicus and his discovery. The belief that, we were supposed to live under the sky, the belief that, it is actually the sun that moves around the earth and not the other way around, as Copernicus said, had great consequences. And it did, and it does. We fly thanks in part to Copernicus. We have all kinds of measurements that are correct, apparently, because of Copernicus. Not only Copernicus, but he played a role. But in terms of sacrality, maybe it was a loss. Whatever my spontaneous speculations, I find these images very moving. Cathedrals or churches without roofs. It's like it is an arrested, it's almost like an arrested, censored growth. I mean, yes, it's an arrested longing somehow. It's in the absence of the roof, the building seems to show that we are living in an abnormal world, that things are not quite as we would like them to be, and we know that this is the case, unfortunately. This is the cathedral in Tuscany where Andrei Tarkovsky filmed his that scene in the film Nostalgia, which I strongly suggest if you love films, to try to watch it. It's a very beautiful film. by a film director about whom Ingmar Bergman himself, a giant in the film in cinematography, said that was the best director ever, Andrei Tarkovsky. In my opinion, Bergman was no less. But anyway, cathedrals without a roof. You let the outside get in if there is no roof, but with a price. On the left, you see a little church, open towards the sky without the roof. The roof is important. There are, I forgot who said it, that there are, maybe Wolfrix said it, that there are three kinds of architects. The architect who is concerned and works mainly with roofs, and I think it was him. If it wasn't him, I apologize, but I think it was him. And he said, there are architects who work mainly with roofs, and he mentioned Zaha Hadid and himself. Then there are architects who work with basements, underground architects. And then there are architects who work with the middle part. So, but the roof is important, very important. And in many important architectures, the roof is, the culmination in a way of the architectural effort. So in the absence of the roof, the meanings could be heavy. But these ruins, if I am to call it so, they are maybe even more moving without the roof. Geme Cantacuzino, an important Romanian architect and theoretician, he said that at Persepolis, there are only the columns, some scattered columns, but for the spirit is enough. And I believe it is so. The roofless cathedral. But these ruins, they are not just about the past. They are also about the future, because we see the future of our buildings in these roofless buildings. When we build, we think that somehow our buildings will be forever as we conceive them. But we know very well it is not so. Even pyramids, the great Egyptian pyramids get eroded by time. This apparently is in Ireland. Apparently is the smallest church ever built, or the smallest cathedral is in Ireland. Now, I like very much this picture, elongated picture, very narrow, and you see the broken roof of a little church. I don't know if I can call it cathedral. Now, a cathedral without a roof is a wounded building. And maybe a wounded building is the appropriate reflection of a wounded soul, our soul. When we talk about a broken heart, well, we have broken buildings, and not any buildings, broken cathedrals, broken churches. I think they could correspond to what we often call broken hearts. Maybe this is how a broken heart looks like, architecturally speaking, like a cathedral without a roof. Okay, and now we go to the second presentation, but just a second, please. Bramante și